Sandra Pinkney is currently the Reform Specialist for Circuit 13 Department Juvenile Justice Probation and Community Intervention. She has served the state of Florida in various positions for over 35 years. She loves experiencing the uniqueness of working with our youth. She has always had a passion to see each youth succeed to their full potential. She is a graduate of Florida A&M University with a bachelor's degree in sociology and completed the Certificate Public Management class from Florida State University. Judy Roysden is a resident of Hillsborough County since 1981. She has served the State of Florida Department of Juvenile Justice and the community for over 34 years. She has extensive work experience in the field, starting her career as an intern in the dependency delinquency field with the Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services, and then with the formation of the Department of Juvenile Justice in 1994. She has worked in all branches of the Juvenile Justice Department, starting with detention services and then on to probation and community intervention. She has served as Chief Probation Officer for Polk, Highlands, and Hardee County for 5 years and then returned to Hillsborough County in 2011 as Chief Probation Officer. She oversees the Department of Juvenile Justice's Probation and Community Intervention Services in Hillsborough County. She has piloted several programs in Polk and Hillsborough to include the Georgetown Crossover Initiative, Community-Based Intervention Implementation, the Juvenile Alternative Detention Initiative, and Juvenile Justice Systems Improvement Project. She serves on many local boards to include Hillsborough County Juvenile Justice Boards and Councils, the Juvenile Justice Task Force, the Youth at Risk Committee, the Juvenile Assessment Center Advisory Committee, Public Safety Committee, Mental Health Court, and several other boards that are dedicated to improving children's lives. She believes in a holistic approach when dealing with our at-risk youth. She is the recipient of the Polk County Teen Pregnancy and Prevention Hero Award, along with being awarded Juvenile Probation Officer of the Year. Judy Roysden holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of South Florida and completed her certificate public management training from Florida State University.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting us. I've worked with Rosemary and Michelle for many years, and they are the most passionate people that I have come across, and always, Rosemary will email me over the weekends and at night, and just concerned about a kid, and it's and just refreshing, and it's nice to know that you have the best interests of our kids at heart. Sometimes we might not agree, but I just want to let you know that I'm over probation and intervention services. If you ever have a problem with one of the probation officers, a question, I will leave you my card, and please feel free to reach out to me. I'll let Sandra tell you a little bit about what she does. A couple years ago, the department formed a reform specialist position, and Sandra's in that position.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting us here. As the reform specialist, I'm kind of like the navigator for the department, probation and community intervention. So I go out because my heart is for these kids to get what they need to be successful. I have a passion for these at-risk youth. A lot of times they don't know. They don't know who to trust. They don't know where to go to get the information that they need to get the help that they need. So I am the one that a lot of times I mainly do not directly deal with the youth, but indirectly I'm out there fighting for them each and every day. I collaborate a lot with our community partners to find out what services are out there for them. I'm constantly at these alternative schools trying to find ways to keep these kids in school, to make sure that one thing, we will talk about that later, what we have a collaboration with our alternative school is that we try to do incentives and to make sure the kids stay in school, because they have to look forward to something. Sometimes all they've heard in their life, they'll never amount to anything, they'll never be anyone. Going to school is not going to help them. A lot of times they get their are kicked out of the mainstream schools because of behavior and things like that. But I am the one who goes out and try to get any kind of service that is needed for the children.
So Sandra returned to me after 35 years. She retired, and I cannot speak enough about how passionate she is for these kids. So I know Michelle went into a lot of what I'm going to also talk about, so we could skip over. Please feel free to stop me at any part. I just wanted, the Department of Juvenile Justice is based on your judicial circuits, 20 judicial circuits. We have 20 branches, 20 chiefs. There's 4 branches within the Department of Juvenile Justice. We have prevention, probation, and community intervention, which is what I cover, detention, and residential. Little bit about the prevention branch. Prevention branch is under Chapter 984, and it's for children in need of services. And Michelle, I don't know if you covered this part? No. Okay. So the Department of Juvenile Justice, we've made many improvements over the years. We've taken a lot of our deep end money that was in residential beds and we put it on the front end, trying to keep these kids from coming into the system in the first place. So we have kids that are ungovernable, status offenses, runaways, truants, and there is a procedure. If the families go to the Florida network, they offer outpatient services. If that is not working, then a petition can be filed and they could be put in respite services over at Children's Services, which we also call Lake Mag. They have respite beds over there, but the only kids that qualify for those, you cannot have an adjudication for delinquency, you can't have an abuse or abandonment report, supervision, you can't be on any type of supervision. So, but they do an excellent job trying to keep these kids out of the system when they first start showing risky behaviors. So low academics, drug and alcohol use, school attendance, runaway problems, anger management. It's a great resource if parents come out to you and ask, hey, I don't know what to do with my child. In the probation branch, we serve any of the youth that are taken into custody. We don't like to say the word arrested. They're actually taken into custody under the ages of 18. This is a little bit about our flow chart. I will go into everything, and I know up in the left-hand corner, this civil citation is mentioned, and you have, someone's going to speak to you, Lieutenant Roca, about civil citation. But it's for kids with first-time misdemeanor offenses. They are eligible for a civil citation and program in Hillsborough County. Some offenses are excluded, but we've worked on it many years, and the whole object is to keep kids out of the system. We don't want them to have arrest records. If you get arrested later on, you don't qualify for jobs with daycares, military. It really hurts your records. So we're proud of our civil citation program in Hillsborough County. Most of our kids, and you're going to look down, go through the Juvenile Assessment Center. And after that, you're released or you go on some sort of detention status. But I will go further into this, but it's a flow chart that you can refer back to. So in Hillsborough County, 90% of our kids go through the Juvenile Assessment Center. They process 5,000 kids over a year. About 400 go in, about 178 or about 180 of those kids meet detention criteria and will go further into the system. So when you get to the JAC, there's an intake staff that administer the detention risk assessment, which they spoke about. There is also a CAT assessment, which I will speak to you about later. They do a suicide risk screening instrument and the MAISY. So as soon as the kids come in, they are given armbands. We try to keep the kids that are going to score for some sort of detention status away from the kids that are diversion eligible. There is a diversion unit at the JAC that will meet with the parent and the youth, and then they will get released to the parent, and I will speak more about diversion. So our detention risk assessment instrument, they went into it. We had a cumbersome instrument for over 25 years. 12 pages, hard to figure out. Law enforcement couldn't figure out who to detain. So as of July, like they said, it's been the collaborative met. Collaborative is 2 state attorneys, 2 judges, 2 state attorneys, 2 public defenders, 2 judges, Department of Juvenile Justice, and the Sheriff's Association are all part of creation of the detention risk assessment instrument. It's new. We're following the trends. It might be that the collaborative has to meet again when they discover certain trends that we didn't know were going to come from it. But it's much more simplified, and it's done by a computer, to avoid any sort of scoring errors. So, like I spoke before, you go into the Jack Center. We have a diversion unit there. Youth are processed through the Jack. They put the armband on. The intake officer will start the paperwork. The youth that will qualify for diversion services are misdemeanor youth and first-time felonies. And it's got to be a felony of the 3rd degree. Too many youth are unnecessarily placed in the juvenile justice system, and others are involved in levels that we want to keep kids out. If we can divert youth, we want to divert them. Diversion is immediate. They get immediate consequences. The only thing about it is the parent and the youth have to admit to guilt. So in Hillsborough County, we have a wide array of diversion services. We mentioned civil citation. That is one way to keep a youth out of the system. We also have teen court, arbitration, mental health walker plans, and JADAP. Little bit about each one. Once again, the parent and youth have to admit guilt, and then they are given, the intake officer will do a state attorney recommendation. Why should this youth get diversion? What are the problems going on? So they will be referred to arbitration, falls under court administration. Kids can go to arbitration, they can go to a process what is called teen court, and they are given sanctions by their peers. We have a youth that might be the judge, one that might be the state attorney or public defender, and then they are administered sanctions by their peers. We also have a program called Juvenile Delinquency Alternative Program. Those are for kids with a little bit more riskier behaviors. It's run by Bays. They've been a provider with us for over 30 years. They have case managers that go out, supervise these kids, make sure they get their sanctions done, and hopefully complete successfully. For the kids that don't complete diversion successfully, it's referred back to the state attorney's office. So for the kids that don't meet diversion criteria, they go through the JAC, and then they are scored out by our DRE. The DRE has different supervised release categories with it. So a youth might score on the DRE 13 points, he's going to secure. We also have now, and this was just developed starting July 1st, we have home detention with EM, and we have home detention, intensive home detention, and intensive home detention with electronic monitoring. Youth is only on there till 21 days or till the case is disposed of, no file, no prost, and our staff supervise them. I have 4 staff that do the home detention contacts. They're strictly surveillance contacts. If the youth has to remain at home, go to school, medical appointments, church, and work. That is it. So my staff have to monitor them. If they're not abiding by it, we allow them, there's certain flexibility, but we have to make sure there's the second formal violation we bring back to court for a detention review. A lot of times our kids, there's something going on in their life where they violated, and we take that into consideration. We do not want to put kids back into detention if we can avoid it. So The staff supervise them. There's another category I'm working on, which is called the Evening Reporting Center. That is for kids that score in between intensive and home detention. I hope to get it developed. Kids would go there for 21 days. They would have pro-social activities, try to engage them, and keep them. The purpose of supervised release is to get them to their court date and keep them crime-free. So the kids that are not put on supervised release and they score 13 points or more, they go to detention services. Detention is those kids that are a public safety risk or are in there on some sort of court order. We have two types of kids in detention: the kids that are awaiting arraignment and kids that have been committed and are awaiting a residential treatment program. Once you are committed, you go back to detention and you wait for your residential bed to open up. There's one detention center in Hillsborough County. Sometimes it gets confused with the Juvenile Assessment Center, but it's off of Del Mabry behind Yankee Stadium. It's been there for years. We've been running about 58 kids as our average daily population. At one time in Hillsborough, we had two detention centers, a 90-bed facility and a 50-bed facility. Our population has been reduced so much that we were able to close one, and now our population is down where we're running about, average daily population is about 58 youth. So what we know about secure detention, it's important not to use secure detention inappropriately. Youth in detention should be a risk to public safety, or be at risk for not showing for their next court date. Secure detention is associated with increased recidivism, interfering with youth's lives. I mean, their school is disrupted. We don't want kids to go deeper into the system. So the secure detention should only be used when necessary. Every case is then assigned a juvenile probation officer, whether a youth is found guilty or not. There's no jurisdiction in the beginning. We call it intake. A lot of our kids are on intake status. They have charges that have not gone to court, but they still get a probation officer. Our system's confusing. They meet with the parent. They discuss what can happen to your son or daughter. They discuss the judicial process. And we also refer out anything the parent might need. If they're having substance abuse issues, we can refer them to substance abuse programs. If they're having anger management issues, we have outside resources that we want to keep these kids from coming back. The family we treat as a whole. There might be other siblings that are involved that need services. So the intake officer meets with the parent, and then we do our assessments. All our probation officers are trained in motivational interviewing. We make sure that they administer the CAT. The CAT is our community assessment tool. It used to be the PAT. That changed. We have a lot of changes in the department. But it's areas that identify domains. They might look at where a juvenile is most at risk, but also look at protective factors in the home. We want to know why we want to identify the criminogenic needs and try to reduce them in any way we can. Risk and protective factors include both static and dynamic factors. Static factors are your youth's prior history. You cannot change that. But then we have the dynamic factors, and that's what we want to concentrate on. Especially if a youth is found guilty, the probation officer is going to look at those dynamic factors and then focus our treatment on that. So, people ask, why are kids in the system? Some of the big 8 risk factors that are mentioned here, it could be abuse of alcohol or drugs, personality factors conducive to criminal behavior, antisocial behavior, dysfunctional family issues, low levels of education, and low levels of pro-social activities. A lot of our families are overwhelmed. The parents don't have time to enroll these kids in football, baseball, anything. I mean, the kids are at home. Our parents are worried about paying the next electric bill. They have to prioritize what's a crisis in their life. So sometimes our kids are neglected, and they don't have these activities that would keep them crime-free. So the department, to get some consistency, if a youth is found guilty, no longer in the intake system, our recommendations are based on the dispositional matrix. We worked closely with the Casey Foundation. We worked closely with Florida State, their research department, to develop a dispositional system that can be consistent across the board. And if you notice, it says minor offenses, serious offenses, violent. Minor offenses would be misdemeanors, serious offenses would be your felonies, and violent would be a violent felony. So the probation officer is going to look at this after they're found guilty and then make a recommendation to court. We try to use the most least restrictive setting for any youth that comes into our system. We do not want to deep end kids. So this is the matrix. It provides consistency and recommendations. And we also, want to make sure that our youth supervision plan lines up with this. So every youth that's put on probation has a yes plan. The JPO creates it, and it utilizes the information that we got through our assessment tool, and it establishes meaning, goals, and actions in collaboration with the youth and the family. We sit down with the youth and the family, we go over the court sanctions, but then also in the YES plan, we look at the criminogenic needs. Does this youth need pro-social activities? How can we get them into pro-social activities? Where can we refer them? Do they need substance abuse? So everything we do is based on the youth supervision plan. Probation is accountability. We want to develop competency, and it's also about public safety. So the probation officer plays a major role with the youth through the system. He works with the youth when they are arrested from the time they transition back into the community. JPO or staff are charged with a broad range of youth, from serious violent felonies to youth who have committed less serious acts of delinquency. And the JPO provides the case management activities, and we want our kids to be successful on supervision. We have a category called probation enhanced services. If we have a youth that is not doing well on probation, we have to exhaust all means before recommending commitment. We take commitment seriously. We don't want our kids going into commitment programs. Sometimes the charges are just too serious that they are going to end up in a residential program. But if they're on probation, the probation officer has to show that they tried to work with the family and exhausted certain things. So one of the things that we have is redirections. It's for our moderate or high-risk youth. It's cognitive behavior therapy that goes into the home. Our kids do not have transportation to get to mental health and substance abuse and family counseling. The only issue with redirections, the parent has to agree to cooperate. It's family counseling for all of them. So the probation officer tries to talk the parent into, hey, please try this. We are not always successful, but we contract with Chrysalis, and they also try to engage the parent. The next thing we have for kids on probation is electronic monitoring. We don't like to use EM for tracking purposes, only if necessary, and the research shows it needs to be short term. We should not be putting a kid on electronic monitoring for a year. They are teenagers. My own kids cannot follow a curfew, for a month. These are kids that don't have supervision at home, and to put an electronic monitoring device on it, you have to have kind of a carrot and stick approach. if you go on this, we try to have the judges, and we can only recommend to make it short term. The other thing we have is EPICS, and Ms. Pinkney teaches the EPICS, and it's effective practices in community intervention. It's something new that came down from Dr. Latessa and University of Cincinnati. So it's basically role playing. The JPO sits down with the youth. They are trained. All of our staff have to go through 3 days of EPICS training. It's sort of a cognitive behavior approach. They get the youth homework. They work with them with risky situations. How would you handle this? Well, maybe if you did it this way. The kids are assigned homework. We use it for our moderate and high-risk youth. We've just kicked it off about
A month ago.
A month ago.
Or they've been trained now, so they're actually using it a month ago.
Yeah, so some of our kids can't get to appointments, so we use this with our kids that can't get there. You know, it's an interview, but it's not just an interview. They use their skills that they learned in this training to try to reduce criminogenic behavior.
Can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
I just want to add to that. One thing we found out, we need to have a meaningful conversation with the youth. I know they come in sometimes, you say, hey, you need to do this, and they're out the door. So when we implementing EPICS, it gives you a more like collaborative relationship with the youth. Then you sit and you have goals. You sit and you ask them, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And you'll be surprised that when that kid look at you like, this is not the norm. You know, they don't normally ask me anything what I want, where my future, where it is. So we motivate. It's all about motivation, letting that child know, yes, you have ideas, you have goals. Sometimes we have to assist with the goals, because sometimes they get goals mixed up with, I just want to complete probation, which it can be a short-term goal, but you want it, it's still in them like, hey, what kind of education? Where do you want to go from here? What do you want to see in the long term? A lot of kids just want a job. They want to work. They want to make sure they can earn their way through life. And that's one of the things we do. And once we find out, we tell them, instead of thinking risky, let's do pro-social. We pull out some pro-social skills with them. So that's why we go through the cognitive behavior interventions with them and have session. Yes, sir.
So, and I may have missed this, I'm sorry if I did, the redirections, is that sort of your program, or is that the provider for the cognitive, the therapy for the kids?
Our program, and you have to be on supervision.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, are asked that a lot, especially on our intake kids. We have developed, which we're pretty excited about, rate agreements also. If they don't qualify, some of our kids are 18, the parent does not want to go to redirections. We have some money now that we used from deeper end services. They put it towards probation, where we have rate agreements, and we can contract out with Chrysalis and Progressus. And if the youth doesn't have any money to make his appointments, the parent can't pay for services, then we will pay to send them to Chrysalis, who has different, they offer CBT, they offer trauma-informed care. So we have redirections with us, and we also have some money for rate agreements that we try to use sparingly for our kids that are really, we don't want them to fail probation because they can't get services.
And the actual providers for things such as CBT, those are contracted out?
Yes.
Contracted through DJJ, and they go through our quality assurance process and monitoring and everything else. But they're not DJJ employees, yeah. So the next thing we just added is JSIS, or Pathways. This is front-end services for kids on probation. Once again, our kids that are a little bit more difficult, it's not our probation officers, they're struggling, they're wraparound services. They will take these kids. Our kids have no transportation. We get limited bus passes. We try to give out for them to make their appointments. But Pathways provides transportation. They assign a case manager to them. They have mentoring. They try to enroll them in pro-social activities. They have groups. Just wraparound services to try to make this kid successful. It's new.
Is this the brand new thing that's for the high, they have to score high risk?
Okay, so they have to score moderate high or high risk or have chief's approval. So if I can show that they have some sort of risk need that requires this, we can also put them on the list.
And it's kind of similar to like Paxson, but for probation.
And out in the community, no longer in the schools, now it's community-based. Paxton, they reported, now they will go to Gary Adult or one of the alternative schools, but they will get them to school. They will try to get their ID badges. So it's wraparound services for our front-end probation kids to try to prevent them from going deep end.
And so is it something that their existing JPO will typically recommend and
Yes.
put in a referral type thing?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, they just started and they're full. But I have 24 slots, they're up to 16, so
Yeah. Miss Oliver just told me about it this week.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
okay, and Miss Oliver's great. And she has referred her kids. So if all else fails, then we approach our commitment staffing. And Michelle talked about that. It's for youth that have serious charges or that can't complete their probation sanctions. We first have to have any youth that we're recommending residential on has to be approved by the supervisor. There's an internal process. Then we set up our commitment staffing process. State attorney's involved, public defender, probation officer sends out the invites. And it's the youth, the parent. The youth can bring anybody else that they want in, their pastor, their coach. Anybody that they want in the staffing can also be there. And at the staffing, they recommended comprehensive evaluation. By statute, any kid that's being considered for residential must have one. It is done by a provider. They have 12 days to complete it. Sometimes tracking down our kids or the parents are not easy. Parents have to be talked into, showing up for the evaluation with the youth. So anytime we could get a little more delay between the youth's finding of guilt and his commitment staffing is helpful. Sometimes they have to go in, they discover the youth has an IQ 69 or below. It requires additional testing. Sometimes we have to do a psychosexual, which, you have to have certain criteria to be able to do a psychosexual evaluation. So we just always are very grateful for the 12 days because sometimes we have to go in and ask for continuance. It just can't be done. They can't track the youth down. Parents not cooperating. Our families are not the easiest to work with at times. And let me just cover what the comprehensive evaluation is going to look at. Physical health, mental health, substance abuse, academic, educational, vocational, IQs. So anything to line up for what the residential treatment program should look like. This is how we determine if a youth is committed, where they're going to go. Some of our programs can only handle youth with medical issues. We get youth with sickle cell anemia, or kids that are, pregnant. So that limits where they can go to a program. We have mental health programs. Some of our kids have serious mental health issues. So the program overview for residential services, the department holds the staffing, and the commitment manager, after the results of the staffing, makes a recommendation. We only make recommendations to court. The judge has the final say. Sometimes the judge will commit a youth without a commitment staffing. It's very rare in Hillsborough County. So youth consider for commitment, attend the staffing, and then if they go to their commitment staffing and it's determined that they need residential treatment, these are our programs. We have minimum, non-secure, high risk, max risk. The purpose of max risk, years ago, many of our kids were going to prison. So max risk is the most secure, barbed wire. It's at least minimum 18 to 36 months, and it's saved for our most deep-end youth. We would rather have them in max risk than prison. They can get an education. We can try to provide counseling services, anything to make them successful. We do not want our kids bound over to the adult system. Probation officers are not allowed to recommend a youth be direct filed unless it is staffed all the way. Let me take that back. Probation officers are not allowed to recommend direct file or recommend that a youth get prison time unless it's staffed all the way up to Tallahassee. We are never to recommend that. We feel that youth are more successful in our commitment programs than going to adult prison.
Maximum risk is typically if they're being sentenced, if they got direct filed and they're being sentenced as a juvenile in the adult court?
Or they can go max risk right out of juvenile court. Yeah, very few go max risk out of juvenile court. Yeah.
And also they could be transfer staff there, like if they were at high risk, can they get transferred staff to a max risk?
Well, usually, most of our kids, if they were direct filed into adult court and they're not progressing or they're getting into fights, we have to notify the adult court judge. And then they can either stay and have another chance or they're going to end up in the adult system.
Okay, but they would never just have, if they're not doing well in the program.
We cannot transfer to adult.
Okay.
No,
Absolutely
No,
not.
but from high risk to max.
We can go from high risk to max, yes. We have an internal transfer staffing process that we can bump kids up. If they are not progressing in their residential treatment program, it's similar to a commitment staffing. They will look at what's going on in the program. Did they get new charges? Are they just not making their levels? Is it not the appropriate program for them? So we have an administrative process within DJJ to transfer kids from non-secure to high up to max. So once again, we don't like to do that. All transfer staffings have to be approved through Tallahassee. They look at all aspects, and we try not to deep end our kids.
And it goes to the judge, and judge has 10 days to respond to that transfer recommendation.
Yeah. So once they complete and while they're in the program, we have a probation officer assigned at all times. We refer to it as womb to tomb. They don't like for us to use that, but there is always a probation officer involved. Our probation officers have to keep in touch with these programs. You might have a youth that is sent to the panhandle. I mean, it's very hard on the youth, it's very hard on the family. So probation officers have to keep in touch with the programs, and they also have to attend all the treatment team meetings. We are trying to do them by Skype now. A lot of our programs are out in areas that can't use it. But we want the youth to feel attached. We can have the parent come in. We can try using Skype. But, it's just to keep that connection. Sometimes youth develop issues in commitment programs. We take this very seriously. If you have a youth that says they've been abused or neglected, we have a CCC reporting procedure process. Please, if you need the number, I can send it out. All allegations of abuse or neglect, if a youth is in a program or has a probation officer, are called up to the IG's office to do an inspection.
And CCC stands for Central Communication Center.
Yeah. And I can send that number out. Our programs are provider run. They are under our quality assurance process. Sometimes, it's difficult to recruit staff that want to work with teens, and the pay's not great. So there can always be improvement done on our residential treatment programs. Some are excellent. Some, to be honest with you, are not so excellent. So if there are issues, we need to know about it. So I mentioned the probation officer being assigned. They attend all the treatment team meetings by phone, by Skype. They also are part of the transition process. I specialize my probation officers. I have one group that just does transition. So the whole thing is to transition the youth back into the community. We have another service called Project Bridge that provides wraparound services, helps the youth get to a job, helps the youth get to counseling, helps them enroll in school. We want to make sure our kids are successful. Our recidivism rate on our kids going to commitment programs, we were not proud of. Since 2006, it's been 47%. That's troubling. We want to try to reduce our recidivism rates for our kids that are deep end. So we're really concentrating on transition. We're really concentrating on reentry. We understand these are our most troubling kids, but our recidivism rates are if they accrue a new arrest within 1 year. So, I explained reentry and talked about our recidivism rates. Even though they're in decline, they've only dropped 2% since 2006, 2007. So the department needs to do better on that. The next slide, I was just some stats. DJJ has a very extensive research department. We are fortunate in one way, we're state-run. A lot of our other states, I think there's only 2 state-run states in the nation where we do everything, probation, and run our state-run facilities. We're able to keep better stats because everything we do is inputted into our juvenile justice system. So you can look at, our stats from, I think I started, is it cut off on there? I think it starts at 2006. But our referrals, crime is down, but also our juvenile crime rates are going down too. The next slide's very tiny, but I could show you on the right-hand side is our high-risk zip codes. And we try to concentrate services in those zip codes. We work with a lot of community partners. We have Hope Street. We have that we're trying to open our evening reporting center in a high-risk zip code, and that's where we assign more probation officers. So intake arrests, firearms. Our firearm charges are up. We went down, and then they have increased, probably with concealed firearm permits. We work closely with the Juvenile Justice Board. They support DJJ and they look at trends in Hillsborough County. We have great partners. Our latest thing was we had partnered with Crime Stoppers, and you might have seen the commercials to tell people, please lock your cars. Everybody keeps a gun in a car and our kids steal them. So, and once you get a firearm charge, you're eligible for detention, you're insecure, and, people don't take firearm charges lightly, especially with juveniles. So we're trying to educate the public on firearms. You might have seen the commercial. And then what the research tells us, 40 years of research provides us with the framework for achieving positive results. Youth with extensive histories that start at an early age, 12 and under, is the key age that you will end up in the delinquency system more than anybody else. We have several things that we are trying to do to focus on 12 and under. Males are at higher risk than females, and criminogenic needs are your risk factors that have been proven to increase juvenile delinquency, and they need to be addressed. I talked about 12 and under. We are working closely with DCF on our dually served youth, but we will have case managers, school partners that don't know what to do with kids. Some of our kids have 3 or more Baker Acts. They might not have delinquency charges, but they're starting to be truant or ungovernable. We started a red flag staffing process. Anybody can refer to this. This is community partners. The parent has to agree. If a parent reaches out to you and says, I don't know what to do with my child, it's very hard to navigate Hillsborough County and all their services. So if it's a simple piece of paper, I think this still has 12 and under on it, but we've extended it. It used to be 12 and under. Now we do all ages up to 17. You can schedule for a red flag staffing. We have Eckert Diversion on there. We have the Medicaid provider. We have many of our community mental health providers. And we work with this parent to come up with a treatment plan. So it's been very successful. We're proud of it. We really want to focus on keeping these kids out of the system before they get delinquency charges. So I can send the referral form out. It's hard to navigate through Hillsborough County and all the services they have. So this is a way to do it.
Can case managers for kids in foster care refer to the red flag?
They can always refer, and then we can reach out if we have services in foster care. But yes, and refer, and then we can look at it. Usually it's right before those kids go into foster care. Our lockout staffings, this is the process we use. But if you have a kid in SIP that you think is not progressing, or you're afraid that the parent might not take back, do a red flag. It's a great process, and Eckert has a good diversion unit that we're trying to wrap services around these families. So I'll let Sandra talk a little bit about the school to prison pipeline. Hillsborough County at one time was the highest in the state for school referrals. We don't want to criminalize our kids when they go to school. So we have dropped. We're proud of that. The school system's really working on this. But we want to make sure we don't develop the school to prison pipeline.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier. I go to the turn to school, meet with the principal, meet with the social worker there, meet with the guidance counselor, and we sit down and we decide what can we do as an alternative than suspending this youth from school. So we develop incentive. We try to develop. Put my glasses on. Incentive plans to assist with the complete of the court order sanctions. This is what happened. Each JPO who has a youth that's assigned to school, they have to take what they call a probation packet to that school. So each school resource officer knows who's on probation at the school. So what we do, we try to improve the attendance behavior and performance at that site. So what they would do, they would call me and say, Ms. Pinkney, we're having a problem with this youth. Can we set up a meeting? So we get the JPO involved, we get the parent involved, we get with the school, and we have a meeting with the youth to try to come up with alternatives and incentives to make for the to hopefully get back the correct behavior and performance while at that site. Also, we have family education and involvement. So we educate our families too in reference to, hey, while at school, the youth has to do certain things. There are rules at school. So they cannot leave the campus without permission unless they have some kind of excuse. They're going to the doctor or something like that. And a lot of times we have problems because with the turn to sites, the children would just walk off the school campus without, and the school resource officer would get in touch with me. So the probation officer would have to get involved. And we normally have a meeting and just sit down and try to come up with alternative, because some of their attention span is not, they have short attention span. So we try to be very creative on what we can do for the youth to keep them motivated while they're in school and also learning at the same time. So we provide resources and some suspension alternatives. We engage the school administration, very involved with the alternative school administration, the staff, the resource officers, and probation staff in a collaborative process. What we came up, these youth have higher rates of violation recidivism, agreement with DJJ, courts, and the school system. So the judges are okay with us giving community service work hour if the youth has good attendance, good grades, good behavior in school. So that's one good thing in the 13th Judicial Court in our juvenile division, that they see this as a pro-social for these kids to get good grades, get good attendance, and good performance while in school. Because
and let me stop her on community service hours. We do not like them. Community service hours are proven, if they are not done in an effective place where the youth gets something out of them, they're not effective. So I mean, sometimes the judges are a little heavy-handed, and these kids have all these hours to do, and it's hard to get them a place. So we really want we want to use their hours towards pro-social activities. Anything we can use to get them hours. If you get good grades, we will give you hours. If you go to school, we will give you hours. So we are always thinking of ways to, try to get the hours done. If picking up trash is not going to make the youth successful. Yes.
Sorry. Has that been communicated to the judges in the state attorney's office?
That's why they allowed us to do the school incentive program.
Yes. That's why we got this right.
And I have to watch sometimes. I'm not an attorney, and I have to go in delicately what I say. That's why I appreciate the public defenders and whatever they can do sometimes, because it's not for me to really speak up. Yes.
For the children in the dependency system who don't have a parent or caregiver, is there a parent surrogate appointed to attend these meetings to ensure the child's educational needs are met and the child's receiving a free and appropriate public school education?
Okay. As far as meetings with the probation officer, or
at the school?
Or at the school?
Yeah,
at the school.
If the child has an IEP or needs an IEP,
They're supposed to attend them.
I think the case manager.
Yeah, the case manager.
Should not be parent surrogate. If the children are in the dependency system, they should have a parent surrogate appointed to go to all of these educational meetings.
I don't know. I don't know if they're at all the educational meetings.
We can reach out to dependency and get with our Rosemary and with that question to see if we can get an answer for you.
Yeah, but that I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. Okay, we have expanded our sites to include our Exceptional Center, Carver Center. What happens is when they do the community service work, if they get good behaviors, they will send me the sheet so I can make sure the JPO, and sometimes the JPO goes to the school and they have a good rapport with the school resource officer, with the administration, and they get the sheet with the community hours on there. So our goal is to improve student outcomes of staying in school and getting an education. Here's a copy. It's very small. I'm not for sure.
If you ever need one, we can get them for you, to hand out to the teachers. But we do try to,
This is our incentive plan where they sign off on. Yeah. Here's another one right here. This is at Carver Center. This is how they grade, and this is how they give them community hours for their grades and academic.
And there's also something, sometimes we have to get permission. We work with Chrissy's Closet, if you don't know about that. Chrissy's Closet is over at Gary Adult. Some of our kids don't have hygiene items. They don't have clothes. We have set up a clothing, or Chrissy Dorian has set up a clothing closet for our kids, because some of our kids don't have the school clothes to go to. To go to school. They're embarrassed.
And everything's free. If they just go there, they can pick out anything they want, from personal hygiene to clothes to shoes to we even brought in book bags, school supplies, things like that.
Yeah, so we will tell the kids, okay, we're having a drive to fill the closet. If you bring in a pack of underwear, a pack of socks, or anything, hygiene items, we will try to give hours for that too. We can't do it all the time, but we do try to have the drive because it's got to fill the closet. So, let me get back my last slide. Where are we heading? The department a couple years ago has a roadmap to system excellence. We're still trying to better serve the youth on our caseloads and achieve improvements. We've identified goals. So our goals are to prevent more youth from entering the system, divert more youth from involvement in the juvenile justice system, use secure detention only when necessary, and ensure appropriate utilization of residential beds. We had a mental health residential bed shortage. I think when the department cut their deep end beds, we cut too many. And this past year, we ran into a wait list of kids waiting in detention, which we never want our kids lingering in detention to get to residential. We do not have any kids waiting at this point. They have put more beds online. I think the legislator gave us 100 new beds. Improve staff skills, strengthen our contract monitoring and procurement process. So, in summary, dealing with our juveniles is never easy. And we are here to help you on any questions you have. Please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you for your time if you have any questions. And that's it. And this is our DJJ research page. If you look up Department of Juvenile Justice, there's a lot of information on there. We've got a lot of statistics. It shows our recidivism reports for every program. It shows you our highest offenses that youth are charged with. There's a lot of information on it, and it goes back for the last 5 years. So thank you.